Good evening, Coin Community, and welcome back to another Coins live stream, or you know it as Coin Community Wednesdays. For tonight's discussion, we'll be talking a little bit more about how we're bringing you guys tokenized assets and RWAs, which you've probably heard about in the crypto space, or real world assets. So, joining me for tonight's discussion are two of my teammates from the business development and marketing team, and I hope that this discussion that we'll be having on RWAs will be a very fruitful and impactful one for you guys, especially if you're not yet familiar with how RWAs work and how you can access RWAs through Coins.ph's app. Also, we'd love for you guys to drop a GM in the comment section wherever you're watching from Facebook or Twitter, and drop a question for our teammates. Maybe they'll answer some of our community questions a little later into the show. But I'd like to bring up my teammates up on screen. So I'd like to bring up first our teammate from BD and marketing. So Manu or Emmanuel Ignacio, how are you doing, my friend? Good evening. How are you doing?
Hey JC, doing great. Very excited to be back here and having these types of discussions with you.
Awesome. So Manu, welcome back to the show. And also a familiar face who's hosted some of our AMAs as well. I'd like to bring up Christine Lim. Christine, how are you doing? Good evening.
Hello, good evening from Manila. I'm in the headquarters here, so happy to have AMA here.
Awesome. So for those who are listening, Christine flew in from Hong Kong today and went straight to the Coins office. So I'm sure, she's super excited for our AMA for tonight, even if she came all the way from Hong Kong this morning. So, I think what we can do is let's dive straight into it and start our AMA with our first question. So for Christine, I guess my question for you is this. So, what exactly is an RWA or real world asset? And why is everyone talking about it in 2026?
So RWA, real world asset, this going very simple. It's a traditional asset like gold or T-bills from the US or just any commodities that has been represented in the real world as a token on the blockchain. So instead of going to have the access to these type of assets through either the banks or financial brokers, you just can directly have an access in your digital wallet since it's available on blockchain. And why is everyone talking about it right now, right? Because markets are evolving. Like investors are no longer trying to choose A or B. It's not about crypto or traditional assets. They want both. And now it's available to have both. So with the blockchain efficiency, it's easier to anchor something with real world value. And what we're seeing in 2026 is just not a hype. It's more about how tokenization is helping this whole infrastructure. It's just not experimentation, but realization of how we can utilize this both.
Exactly. And I think what we're really seeing, as you mentioned, is, these assets, this industry is maturing. So what we want to do is to be able to bring them on chain here at Coins, bring them to our customers, the Filipino users. So moving on, I guess, for Manu, so I think a big craze in the market right now is gold, right? So we see both XAUT and PAXG on the app. So maybe you can tell us a little bit more about, what's the real difference between these two similar, but not quite exactly the same token?
Sure. Great question, actually, because that's one of the questions I get frequently asked by my friends and family, especially when they find out I work in coins. But to explain it simply, both Tether Gold or XAUT and Pax Gold or PaxG are backed 1:1 by physical gold. So that just means that for every token issued, there is an equivalent amount of real gold stored securely in vaults around the world. In terms of gold exposure, they function pretty much the same way, actually. I would say the key differences comes down to, well, one, issuer structure, two, transparency, and three, typical user preference. So for example, XAUT, it's issued by Tether. They're one of the biggest crypto companies worldwide, and they're more probably known for being the company behind USDT. XAUT is often preferred by more active crypto traders, I would say, partly because of its liquidity and integration within the broader crypto ecosystem. So the gold backing XAUT is stored in, I believe, Swiss vaults. PaxG, on the other hand, is issued by Paxos and is regulated by the New York Department of Financial Services, or the NYDFS. The trend I'm seeing right now is this is more commonly chosen by individuals who value more regulatory oversight for transparency. With PAXG, holders can even look up the specific serial number of the gold bar their token represents, which is actually quite cool. So in summary, both are backed 1:1 by physical gold. XAUT is more regarded for having better liquidity and for active trading. And PAXG, on the other hand, places more emphasis on regulatory structure and overall transparency.
Awesome. And I think it's great, as you mentioned, that there are these differences. But I think for the end user, this might be the question that comes to mind. So, someone, the everyday, maybe Coins user, might want to start putting money into gold, right? So if I, as a Coins user, only buy 500 pesos worth of XAUT, does that mean that I actually own the gold?
Yes, that is correct. So even owning 500 pesos worth of XAUT allows you to own actual gold. That's the quote-unquote magic of fractional ownership. So a full gold bar can typically cost millions of pesos, which can often be out of reach or, well, honestly, for being honest, impractical for the typical everyday investor. Tokenization changes that by allowing a single gold bar to be divided into many small digital pieces, thereby allowing you to own fractions of it. So when you buy 500 pesos worth of XAUT, for example, you are essentially buying a specific weight of real physical gold that is securely stored in a vault. You don't have to worry about safes, insurance, or even logistics. The gold you own exists in the real world, and more importantly, it is also verifiably held. It's pretty cool actually because this approach lets you participate in the gold market in a very practical way, but also in a very accessible means. You get all the benefits from the price movements of gold, but with far less capital and with also far more convenience. So for everyone or for anyone who wants to own gold, I believe this is a great way to start.
Perfect. So yeah, as you mentioned, you don't have to buy, a whole ounce or ton of gold. You can start with just 500 pesos and whatever you can set aside, from your income or your paycheck. So now I'd like to pass the stage back to you, Christine, right? And the question that, I have is this. So maybe you can tell the coin community what's really driving this demand for tokenized gold right now in the market.
Okay. Yeah. So I guess demand is basically being driven by three forces, I would say. Very straightforward would be accessibility, because in the past, if you think about it, gold really required like large capital. You can't just buy a tiny fraction of gold. You needed to have a place to physically store it, and you need to also think about how you want to move it around the logistics. But today you can just easily start with a few hundred pesos directly on Coins.ph app or even any other app exchanges. And liquidity-wise, tokenized gold trades 24/7, meaning you can always access without considering about bank hours, and it's near instant settlement. But something that I would also like to highlight is macro uncertainty. With current market, with how the global market becomes very unstable or unpredictable, investor rotates into more hard assets. So gold always has been those defense mechanism of a lot of investors. So for many users, this is not just about speculation, but it's also about their portfolio balance. So as it's historically always played as a defensive role, tokenization is just making it even more simple, where investors or just everyday users like us can easily access it and maintain and balance their portfolio investment.
Perfect. Yeah, I mean, like, there's so much uncertainty in the world right now. You have all the news about war, about tariffs, and I think that's also driving the demand for the everyday user because uncertainty equals gold in these markets. So I guess another question I have for you, Christine, is this, so for us here as Coins, we do a lot of due diligence when it comes to, these tokens. So how does Coins make sure that, this gold actually exists?
So we basically, first of all, we basically don't hold any custody of these physical gold ourselves, but we list the tokens that are issued by established entities like Tether, XAUT, and then PXG by Paxos, right? So each issuers, as what Emmanuel earlier said, they maintain third-party custody and publish different types of reserve attestations. So in case of PXG, what Eman said was people can actually go up, the holders can go up and actually check the gold bars like serial number and verify their allocation. So for us, Coins.ph, as a BSB licensed exchange, we definitely do conduct due diligence before listing. We have our rigorous process, including reviewing issuer structure, their transparency, and also the regulatory positioning. So we only list the assets that pass our strict safely and regulatory standards because your peace basically of mind is our priority and your happiness is our goal. So I think users do not have to really concern about those like all the other concerns when it comes to Coins.ph because we would do those steps for you.
Exactly. And I guess as you mentioned, we do all that due diligence so that the end result that we can offer, is something that our users can trust. So going back to you, Manu, I think the question that I'd like to ask you next, so we work on a lot of campaigns and we want to make sure that access is very seamless, right, in buying and selling gold. So, on coins, maybe people haven't tried it yet, but is it a headache to sell these tokens back into pesos?
Not really. I would actually consider it to be much simpler and much more convenient than dealing with physical code because you don't have to go around looking for pawn shops or specialized dealers. And let's be honest, especially in the Philippines, it can be quite difficult to look for these specialized stores. On top of that, when dealing with digital gold, you don't have to carry that additional risk of bringing around bars of gold or coins in your bags or in your pockets. With XAUT and PXG, you can sell your tokens instantly using Coins.ph. Afterwards, the peso you receive from the sale gets credited straight into your wallets. So it becomes ready to use immediately. You can also pay bills, scan a QRPH code in your favorite store, or transfer to your bank afterwards. You pretty much get all of the flexibility, and we try our best to make owning gold feel as simple and as convenient as using cash. So that's pretty much it.
Awesome. So I guess I'd like to, pass, the question back to you, Christine. So maybe aside from gold, are there other RWAs, coming to the Coins platform?
Yeah, I mean, this AMA, we've been kind of focusing on gold earlier, right? Because I guess that's just the easier starting point where everyone can understand. But RW just doesn't limit there, obviously. We actually recently listed uranium, which might sound a bit niche to some of the users, but it is really a big part of the global trend where investors want to take a stake in the energy transition since, I guess, early last year. And then I think it's even growing more. So we did list uranium, and we're also very excited to list silver tokens soon. But yeah, just to kind of add on over here, our approach is quite selective. So we prioritize assets that are backed by verifiable reserves issued by credible counterparties. And it also has to be structurally aligned with the BSP compliance standards. Therefore, we can't really list everything in the RWA assets, but we're trying to just build the depths in the assets that we are listing so we can sustainably serve our users and give our users just all-in-one app experience for every asset class that matters.
Awesome. I guess the next question I have, is something like with regards to access, right? So maybe people are probably asking, why shouldn't I just buy a traditional gold exchange traded fund or ETF or a bank offered bond instead?
Mm-hmm. You absolutely can. Well, we're not saying you shouldn't. What we're trying to do on coins is we're giving you more options in terms of your investment strategy. So traditional ETFs and bank products remain valid tools. There's a reason why it's still there, even with all the crypto products and DeFi products, right? The difference lies in the access and settlement mechanics. So tokenized RWAs offer 24/7 trading, as I mentioned earlier, nearly instant, faster settlements, lower minimum threshold, and then direct on-chain ownership representation. So we're not trying to replace traditional finance. It's just giving the users more additional, more flexible access point with the infra that is provided to the world.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, I guess aside from flexible, easy to use, and frictionless, is really something that we're trying to push forward. So I think another question that I might have for you is this: so do you think personally that the RWA or real world asset craze is here to stay?
Every new financial innovation goes through these cycles, right? But I don't think this is something that's just a whole hype and it's gonna like the bubble is gonna pop and go away. What makes RWA very different is that they do solve structural inefficiencies. So settlement speed, accessibility, as I mentioned so many times now in the past, I guess 20 minutes. Um, what we're seeing is also a lot of institutional participations globally around the world in tokenized treasuries and commodities. So this is not really retail excitement when especially bigger players are coming in, like institutions, right? It's more of a structural upgrade that I would personally think. And over time, digital wallets will actually hold a mix of crypto and traditional assets side by side, and it's going to be even more and more accessible for everyone in the world. So that's what tokenization is about. It's about how the integration is becoming more accessible and possible.
100%. And I think, we'll see more of that adoption over time. So I guess I'd like to pass the microphone back to you, Manu. So, Manu, maybe the question I have for you is this one. So, does real world asset tokenization actually help the average Filipino, the average and everyday coins user?
Yes, I would say it's a big help. And that's one of the main reasons why we're pushing on introducing more RWA token offerings in the coins. If you look around, a lot of people in the Philippines want to invest, but they just don't. And that's not because they don't care. It's, I believe, more because the barriers to entry are a bit high. Factors like high banking fees, high minimum investment amounts, complicated paperwork, or just not knowing where to start can contribute to making investing feel out of reach for the average investor. This is where RWA tokens or real world assets can come into play. So basically, it lowers the entry point. What used to take thousands of pesos or dollars can now be done with as little as like 100 pesos or less. You don't have to be in Makati or have a huge net worth to start participating. Someone in a small provincial town can now have access to the same types of assets that were previously reserved for bigger or more larger scale investors. So the goal here is to make the investment opportunities more inclusive, more practical, and of course, well, more realistic for the everyday people or everyday person.
Yeah, 100%. And as you mentioned, you don't need to even, have a broker to be able to access these, I guess, products, because that was a big blocker in the past, especially in other platforms where, having to access these products required, intermediaries that we're really trying to remove so that access is more, seamless. So I guess maybe another question that I have for you is this one. So, maybe what happens if there's a technical glitch or a hack? Is my real asset gone, disappeared forever?
No. So no. The answer to that question is no. Your assets don't go away, but that's one of the reasons why we work with regulated partners. So RWAs have a legal layer, and each token represents a claim on a real asset. So, like for example, gold, it's stored in the vault. So there's paper trail in terms of where it's stored outside of the blockchain too. Plus, as a BSP license exchange, we have security protocols in place to ensure that your assets are always protected.
Awesome. I guess I'd like to pass the microphone back to Christine. So, Christine, we've seen crypto winters before, or like bear markets. So, is the real world asset market, just as volatile?
So some difference I would say is Bitcoin, Ethereum, Solana. These all really swing based on the market sentiment, right? But the price of gold token or tokenized T-bill is more tied to the real world value of the specific asset. So RWA inherits the volatility of a profile of their underlying asset, meaning gold-backed tokens would move with the gold prices. Silver will move with silver. Uranium will move with uranium. Tokenized T-bills will move with the interest rates. So there's a bit of a difference over here that they're not really immune to the price movements, but they are generally less sentiment driven than pure crypto assets that what we've been seeing. So for many users, RWA can act as stabilizers in their broader digital asset portfolio. So they can kind of decide, oh, like if I want to actually have a fraction of gold tokens or like T-bills, it's easier to access, then I can have it. But also, I know the price movement would be more balanced. It's less volatile. Then they can consider that into their process. Yeah.
Awesome. So I guess right now, we have some community sentiment that we also want to talk about, and we have a few minutes left. But we, want to take the opportunity, since the both of you are on the business development side, and people are curious, I guess. So right now, maybe people have been tracking our listings, right? So maybe I think Manu, maybe you can take this question on. So right now, is the team mainly focused on real world asset listings, or how are you guys deciding like what to prioritize when it comes to listing new tokens on Coins?
Sure. So we're not exclusively targeting RWAs, right? But it is one of those sectors that we're taking a closer look at to give the community an idea, a better picture, perhaps. Our BD priorities are guided by three main verticals or three main factors. One is user demand, two is market structure, and three is regulatory clarity. So RWAs are part of the roadmap because globally, tokenization is ramping up. But we will still evaluate other sectors like, for example, L1s, DeFi, infra tokens, and other sectors as well. The difference is that as a regulated exchange, we can't just list tokens based on hype cycles. We apply compliance and risk filters before listing anything, just because we want to be able to make sure that any tokens that are offered on our exchange have been vetted thoroughly before it gets available and you guys can buy or sell it. So sometimes responsible pacing may look conservative from the outside. But yeah, overall, we are not just specifically looking at RWA tokens. It's only one of the sectors that we are seeing more traction coming into.
Right. I guess, Christine, I'd like to pass the floor back to you. So maybe some of our community members have been raising their concerns, about delisting. So maybe you can break it down a little bit and answer some of their questions. So what typically drives the reason why we delist tokens?
I mean, it's a very fair concern, and we definitely understand why users would ask about it. So listings are very dynamic across the entire industry, not just limited to Coins, but every other exchanges. And we normally continuously monitor the tokens based on certain criteria, such as liquidity, security posture, their overall project activity, and also regulatory developments. So if these factors change materially, then we reassess, and we're constantly monitoring. It feels like it's like limiting the options, obviously, but it really isn't. It's just a part of the risk management in such a volatile market in crypto. And some projects grow stronger over time, some slow down, some face uncertainty. It really, we can't really like say what's going to go right, what's going to go wrong, right? But as the industry matures and regulations becomes clear globally, listing standards are naturally becoming more rigorous. And then I think there's more structures being established fundamentally. So when we decide to delist, we don't really make this decision really lightly. Ultimately, it's our responsibility to maintain a marketplace, a platform that's stable, compliant, and sustainable for all the users in the long run. And yeah, that's what we've been working on. And you might sometimes see some delisting announcements that might not be happiest, but it's actually for your best, and we're trying to serve.
Awesome. Thanks, Christine. I guess maybe to wrap up the AMA, I'd like to ask you both for a closing message for the community that's tuned in for tonight's discussion. So maybe we can have you first, Manu.
Sure. Well, from my perspective, I think now is a very good opportunity to reassess like a lot of different investment vehicles or investment opportunities, right? So Now, I would say we're very fortunate to be alive in a time where investing has been becoming a lot more accessible. Like 10 years ago, 15 years ago, when I was asking for investment advice from my parents, like in terms of how they invested their money, right? It was always mentioned that it's hard, it's hard to look for other options. So currently, Coins.ph, we have a lot of different offerings, not just on, like, for example, the top coins like Bitcoin, Ethereum, Solana. We're now slowly branching out into RWAs. We still have those, like, some meme coins that are occasionally popping up. And my advice would be, whenever you get into investments, always, the old-fashioned saying, do your own research. And I think that holds true until now. But more importantly, I would recommend that you guys start out very small. You don't really have to start out with a big, I guess, big initial investment. With coins, we've made it very accessible. We've made it very easy. You can buy crypto with as low as 50 pesos. So with 50 pesos, you can already start your crypto journey. You can try and discover the ins and outs of trading. Yeah.
Christy, maybe a closing message for the coin community tuned in tonight.
Yeah, I'll just add a bit more. I guess what I will always say is you need to learn your lesson by actually doing it. If you're very like small-minded, you don't know what you want to do, you just like reading and then just observing all the time, you'll never learn. So with Coins app, it's so easy. You can easily deposit, easily withdraw, easily access all these type of assets. And if you make some money, you can use QRPH to also make some payments, right? If not, you learn your lesson. So just try with small amounts and then see how that leads you to. It's a good timing. Why not, right? But
I
not
agree.
a financial
That's what you learn by doing and averaging in. So I guess that sums it up. Wraps it up for our AMA for tonight. I hope everyone learned a little bit more about real world assets, how it's available on coins, how you can start DCAing or peso cost averaging into these offerings that we have, and also building your own portfolio so that you can include RWAs in your portfolio. So I'd like to thank Emma and Christine for joining us for tonight's AMA. I'm JC, your community manager for Coins.ph, and we'll catch you all on another future AMA. So have a good rest of your evening to the both of you and to the rest of the community tuned in. Have a great evening and goodbye, everyone.
Bye-bye.